talk another important part of Starch Applique method, and that's freezer paper. I've been using freezer paper for a long time in quilting, and there's a lot of different methods that you can use with freezer paper. The beauty of freezer paper is it works a lot like a sticky note, where you can pull the template on and off of your fabric applique shape that you're working on. So here I have, from my Home Sweet Home applique pattern, the Tufted Birdie template. I have a Lightbox, and this is something that I actually use a lot. If you're doing a lot of applique, I would highly recommend it. If you're doing paper piecing, I would highly recommend it. It means that you don't always have to hold your template up to the light or trace on a window. Those things both work, but if, like I said, if you're doing a lot of either paper piecing or a lot of applique, it's something that I would highly recommend. If you'll notice, when you lay your freezer paper on the template, you can still see through the freezer paper in order to trace your shape. The part where it becomes a little bit difficult is if you want to change the direction of your shape. For instance, you'll notice here, the bird is pointing to the right. The important thing is with working with freezer paper, you need to remember to think backwards. Here on your template, your birdie is facing to the right. But if you trace this template as is, then your birdie is going to face to the left whenever you're finished with it. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to remember to always think backwards when it comes to freezer paper applique. If you're using a simple shape such as a leaf or a circle, you don't need to do this, but for other motifs where there are directional motifs, you do have to pay attention to this. So now that I've flipped the template over onto the other side and I place the freezer paper on top, it becomes a little more difficult to see the line that I'm to trace, which is why it's important to use a Lightbox if one is available to you. I really like this Lightbox. This is from Huon, and as you will notice, if you lightly tip on the power button, then your light will dim in case it's too bright for you to work. Place your freezer paper on top of your template, and you want to make sure that you're tracing on the paper side of your freezer paper. You'll notice that there is a slick side of the freezer paper and then a paper side. You can tell the difference if you just take a pencil and do a little mark. On the paper side, it'll show up. On the wax side, it kind of slips a little bit and you don't have a mark. So that's how you can tell the difference between the paper side and the wax side. So all you do is place your freezer paper on there and begin to trace the template. So just continue tracing your applique shape or your template. Sometimes on straight lines I will use a ruler whenever I'm transferring it, or I will correct it a little bit as I'm cutting the shape out. So there you have your finished shape. What I do then is I rough cut the freezer paper and I'm ready to iron it. When I'm making the templates, I'm often using my pressing board again because it just has a nice hard surface to work with, and that gives you better shapes. Again, it's very important to have your steam turned off when you're doing your applique templates. And I especially like to use a large iron whenever I'm making the templates. The mini iron does work, but you just get it more fully pressed. It's important to keep it on long enough so that way you don't have bubbles that are starting to form underneath. And a lot of times when I'm working with multiple shapes, if I trace a lot of shapes out on the paper, then I'll rough cut them in groups so that way I'm not ironing a whole entire page of freezer paper. So I let that sit a little bit until it's dried, or excuse me, until it's cooled down. And then I pull it up. The reason I let it cool a little bit is so it doesn't start to curve when I cut. So when you're layering your freezer paper, you always do shiny side down. So here's shiny side on the bottom freezer paper, and I've layered it shiny side down with the top freezer paper. So you always have the paper side facing up. So then you're ready to cut out your shape. And again, any mistakes that I might have made where it's a little off, I can correct when I'm cutting it. And once you have that shape cut out, you're ready to go.